Hey everyone, welcome back to the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast, where today Mike Tagliere and I are going to be talking about the second and third year fantasy players with guest Dan Harris. Tags, Dan, how's it going, fellas?
Great, Bobby. How you doing?
I am very hot. It is hot in my house. I have a fever, and I'm very congested, so you guys will have to forgive me today.
I was about to say, Bobby, you sound a little under the weather today. I'm doing fantastic. The baby got 3 shots today, so it wasn't the greatest morning for me. But the sitter has him now. She's kind of dealing with that while I'm recording this. But I'm looking forward to this episode, man. We're going to introduce a new segment to the show that I really feel like the listeners are going to love, and we're going to do it once we talk about the news and notes. But yeah, man, hopefully you start feeling better pretty soon.
Thank you. So you guys all know my wife's pregnant, and she's been having all these cravings. This past week, she's been craving pizza so much. I'm the kind of guy who could eat pizza like every single day and still be happy. But now that we're finally eating all this pizza, I can't even taste it because I'm so stuffed up. It's terrible.
Oh, that's the worst. You're taking in bad calories, and you're not even getting to experience the joy of putting pizza in your mouth. So
it's terrible.
Pizza's my favorite. I could eat pizza every day of the year. Dan, are you the same way?
You live in Chicago, so you get great pizza. Really important question, guys. This tells you everything about a person's fantasy football talent. How do you guys prefer your pizza?
I'm like a hand toss type guy. There's deep dish and a lot of people in Chicago. Oh, pepperoni and sausage. Pepperoni is like the must. Sausage
you seem like a pepperoni and sausage guy. Dan, where are you at, man? Like some fancy New York stuff?
No, the problem is, first of all, my wife might be the healthiest human being of all time. So every time she splurges on pizza, sad. It's like the veggie and the peppers and blah, 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 blah. If I had my druthers, it would pretty much be pepperoni. I got to be honest, and this might be a little controversial. Yeah. I sometimes go with mushroom.
What is wrong with you?
I'm a weird guy. What do you want? You grew up frankly, where I am now, and the pizza's just, whatever I eat, it just tastes like I'm eating cardboard at this point. You know what I mean? When you grow up on New York pizza and then you move anywhere else other than Chicago, of course, it's pretty much just such a drastic drop that doesn't matter.
I'm a meatless pizza guy. What I do is I put a base of olive oil on and tomatoes, and then on top of the cheese, and you can't use the store shredded cheese or whatever. You got to use a ball of mozzarella cheese and cut it up just right. And then on top, artichoke hearts, baby. That's where it's at. Oh, God. And then
what is wrong with
garlic,
you?
Dude.
Hold on a second.
Real garlic. Yeah. Pot calling the kettle black.
You guys don't
That's
even
where we're
know
at right now.
You guys don't even know. Okay.
Bobby's smoking crack, and that's why he's sick right now.
Let's just move on over. And today we're going to be talking about second and third year players. We're just going to go position by position. And some of these guys we've already talked about quite a bit, so we won't talk about those guys as long, like Hunter Henry. But we'll start at the quarterback position. Jameis Winston, Marcus Mariota, third-year quarterbacks. Dan, how do you feel about these guys?
I'm definitely a fan. Obviously, they're going right around, I think, the same spot, or they're in the same spot around in our ECR, actually back-to-back as of the latest update, QB 12 and 13 at 86 and 87. And yeah, I can see myself certainly ending up with both of them. We're all kind of wait on QB guys for the most part. Winston was solid in 2016. It wasn't that he was this enormous, sort of took this big drop. Bobby, I remember we talked sometime around week 5 where we both loved him going forward, kind of with his schedule. And
because of the schedule, yeah.
Exactly.
That didn't work out.
No, it didn't, quite frankly. But now with, adding Deshaun Jackson and O.J. Howard, it was great. And I read this great stat that Winston has the second highest percentage of deep throws for any quarterback over the last 5 seasons. And so now that you're adding in Deshaun Jackson, basically it's just going to be bomb city for a lot of it. And they throw a lot in the goal-to-go situations as
Interception city sounds more like it.
Yeah,
he just turns the ball over so much. That's why they had to change their offense, right? They just started running the ball a ton because Jameis Winston could not hold on to the ball.
Yeah, well, to be fair, though, obviously Cameron Brate, especially later on in the season, came on. But other than Mike Evans, it was Mike Evans and bums for the wide receivers.
Right.
Literally everybody just kept going down with an injury, right? Adam Humphries was maybe the best guy, and then he was even going out. So he really didn't have them to throw to. I agree, though. Last year, personally, I was pretty disappointed by it. But frankly, I think with the addition, especially of Deshaun Jackson, I don't know how much of an impact O.J. Howard is going to have in his first year. But they didn't add anything in the running back. They're apparently excited about Doug Martin, which makes them maybe the only people in the world that, so they didn't add anything with the running back situation. So he's going to be throwing a lot. So I'm definitely a fan. I'm not saying that I have him that much higher than the ECR, probably 1 or 2 spots. But I'm pretty solid. With Mariota, again, it's just about health with him. He's fantastic. Obviously adding in Corey Davis. He averages about 18 fantasy points per game in his career. That's pretty awesome. The injury concerns are legitimate. He's already missed 5 games in his 2 years. and he can't participate in the OTAs. I don't really know what his availability is going to be for the preseason, so I'm a little less bullish on him. But I'm definitely I'm expecting big things from Winston.
Yo, Bobby, I'm gonna chime in real quick here because you're gonna have to forgive Bobby because he's sick. He totally skipped over the news of the day. So we're gonna go back to the news. I had the news all mapped out today. I'm like, I'm prepared. We're gonna do our segment, and then Bobby goes, "We're gonna talk about Marcus Mariota and Jameis Winston." I'm like, I want to talk about those guys.
Excited, man.
I believe it. And Jameis Winston. So without jumping around too much, obviously Jameis Winston, I have him as my QB9 right now. I just finished up my projections, and I have him right in between Matt Ryan and Dak Prescott. So I obviously like him. Dan, I love that you mentioned. I like that you mentioned the deep ball stats, but here's the thing. Doug Martin's not going to be there for the first 4 games. The running backs they have on the roster, Charles Sims is a pass catcher. O.J. Howard is going to be a deep field. Like he goes down the seam as well. So you have O.J. Howard, you have Deshaun Jackson, you have Mike Evans. You have to pick your poison. I like Charles Sims too. I think he's been extremely underrated. I think that he's someone who I'd like to see more involved in the run game. I don't know what happened last year, why they felt like Jacquizz Rodgers was better. Now, granted, Jacquizz Rodgers did a fine job in what they asked him to do. He carried a massive workload. Charles Sims was it seemed just like he never returned from his injury. So I'm curious to see what they do in the first 4 weeks, but Jameis Winston's one of my favorites. Marcus Mariota, he's a little bit down the list just because I do believe that they want to run the ball. I don't think his touchdown numbers will be as high as they were last year. His touchdown percentage was kind of through the roof, as was, Rashard Matthews. So, definitely taking Jameis Winston there if I had to pick one of them. Who's your pick, Bobby, before we get into these notes?
It's Winston. I'm not a big fan of either of them this year. I have them both outside the top 10, but Mariota's down at 14 for me. I'm just not sure that I buy him running the ball as much because of the injury issues, and they're going to try to keep him healthy. He's the franchise piece, and, I'd rather have a Tyrod Taylor. We've talked about this before. I just don't think Mariota's going to be able to be a fantastic passer like Winston. I think Winston's a very good passer. He could pass for 5,000 yards this year. I really believe that. I mean, a lot of people don't realize this, but him and Cameron Brate were the best of any other hookup in the league last year in terms of quarterback rating. I think Cameron Brate's going to be really useful again this season. I think he's going to slip a lot because of O.J. Howard, but why not just use 2 tight ends? I think that's what they'll end up doing.
Yeah, they're going to end up using that. They may go 2 tight end more than they go 3 wide receiver. I mean, Adam Humphries or Cameron Brate. I mean, it really depends on the package they want to run, but that's the option they have. They have so many different ways that they can go in the offense, and that's part of the reason I like Jameis Winston so much this year. I just feel like all their running backs can catch the ball pretty well, and he's got amazing. He probably has the best pass catching trio in the league between the tight end and the 2 receivers right now. And I don't think that's a hot take by any stretch of the imagination. But one thing that I'm really, really not excited about is the news that took place today. LeGarrette Blount signing with the Eagles. Everybody kind of jumps forward and says, this is a great signing. This is what the Eagles needed. I think that there's a reason LeGarrette Blount wasn't signed by a team until now. That's where I'm at with it. I think it was a desperation signing. And I believe that Ryan Matthews is a better running back than LeGarrette Blount.
He's a great running back.
I don't think it's all that close. That's exactly the problem. But Dan, what do you make of this? That they're waiting for Ryan Matthews to get healthy and then they're going to cut him. And are you getting excited about LeGarrette Blount, or are you with Bobby and I and the fact that he's just not very good?
Well, I don't know if they're mutually exclusive, technically. I don't think LeGarrette Blount is very good, and I don't think anybody really thinks LeGarrette Blount is very good. And I think you made the great point that he's just sort of been sitting out there and nobody really was rushing to sign him. At the same time, I mean, the Eagles, they run a lot when they get close to the goal line. They had the 5th most rush attempts inside the opponent's 5-yard line last year. So, LeGarrette Blount last year wasn't that good, but I don't know off the top of my head how many touchdowns he scored, but I owned him, so I know it was 18, was it? Is that what it was? So, I mean, it's, he's not going to threaten that number again, but he's certainly going to have value. Did I think that they needed to do it? No. But now that he's there, he's definitely piqued my interest a little bit. I mean, I'm not sure exactly, I wouldn't expect last year, but I can see him, being around 200 carries, around 800 yards, and I don't know, getting somewhere between like 7 and 9 touchdowns. So that's certainly a viable player, but I agree from a real life perspective, I don't really understand the signing, and Ryan Matthews is obviously a far superior running back in terms of talent.
Yeah, and LeGarrette Blount, he's going to be 31 at the end of this year, so it's not like he's a spring chicken or anything like that. I think he's past his prime. His yards after contact last year was 2.5 yards, and that's behind guys like Latavius Murray, Terrence West, Jonathan Stewart. So again, I'm just not a big fan of LeGarrette Blount.
I'll tell you why I'm excited about the LeGarrette Blount signing. The reason I'm excited about the LeGarrette Blount signing is because it means people are going to draft him a lot higher than he's worth, because he's in a good situation in Philadelphia where he's going to get a lot of carries. And I just think this guy's, I don't want to say a bum, I mean, because he did score a ton of touchdowns last year, but he's not very good. I don't think he's going to help fantasy owners that much, and that means someone like Derrick Henry is going to slip to me.
How do you feel? I'll ask both of you guys. Who would you take first? Would you take Amir Abdullah or LeGarrette Blount?
Abdullah.
Nice. I like it. I like the upside pick.
Yeah, I've personally been, and we might talk about this later. I've been pretty obsessed with Amir Abdullah since that first preseason game where he made look like it was like a video game against the Jets, which I was obviously watching.
He was awesome.
Because of that, so every year I'm all in on Amir Abdullah, and it hasn't exactly worked out yet, but this will definitely be a year. So I would far prefer him to LeGarrette Blount.
So the next news that I wanted to hit is there's a couple rookies that are making some noise, and I think it's all hearsay right now, Dan. I'm not so I could trying to avoid going on a rant right now. Joe Williams is like the talk of Twitter today, and the fact that one of the beat writers said that there's a chance that he can unseat Carlos Hyde as the 49ers starting running back, and I think it's a joke.
Yes.
I think we go through this seemingly every year. Last year we did the same thing with Carlos Hyde. I was willing to take that discount, and it's the same thing here. I mean, Joe Williams was outside of my top 15 running backs before the draft took place, and him going to the 49ers, his talent is not enough to overtake Carlos Hyde at this point. So where are you guys at in this whole situation? Are you with me?
I'm with you. He was not a top 12 running back for me. I mean, he's got a lot of talent, but I'm not so sure that those stats are going to hold up in the NFL. Not even close.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you. I don't have the anger that you have, Mike, because I know you've been defending Carlos Hyde pretty vociferously this entire offseason, and I'm with you there. I didn't understand that. I read that today too. I had absolutely no idea where it came from. I don't think there's any real chance. I mean, Hyde's in the last year of his deal, I guess, right? Is that what it is? And so, obviously he's battled injury and stuff like that. But no, it's not going to happen. I'm not giving it any mind.
Would you even draft Joe Williams, Dan?
At this point, no. I mean, there's a long way to go. If we're drafting right now, no, I don't think I'd draft him. I'm not a big handcuff guy. I don't know about you guys. That's not really how I roll. I don't try to handcuff my back. So if I drafted Hyde, I wouldn't necessarily be looking to draft Joe Williams. But right now, no. I mean, I haven't finalized exactly what I'd do, but he's certainly not looking at him at this point.
Yeah, and all the hearsay, by the way, guys, it's just like us with opinions here. These are beat writers that have, but have the head coaches have not even seen. He hasn't even seen Carlos Hyde on the practice field, so I don't really understand where this is coming from. I have not heard Kyle Shanahan come out and say we're unhappy with Carlos Hyde, so I think it's all hearsay right now. And if you're the 49ers, here's what you do. Carlos Hyde is in a contract year, right? You know you're going to lose him after the season. Seemingly you're ready to move on from him already. Okay, why not let him go out there? You're not winning anything. Let him go out there, use him, trade him before the trade deadline, get something, anything. Even if it's a 5th round pick, at least you get some compensation for giving him away to, a contender. And Carlos Hyde is in a better situation because of that. I mean, I know his durability is a concern, but he is one of the most talented running backs in the game. I don't see a guy that was projected to go in the 6th or the 7th round overtaking him just because a beat writer said this. So I'm not buying it at all. Now that I'm done with my rant, Samaje Perine, he's actually someone that I think is deserving of the hype just because Rob Kelly, I don't think that he has... I don't think he showed enough. I mean, everybody wants to talk about that 3-touchdown game against the Packers. Did you know that after that game, Kelly totaled just 280 rushing yards on 84 carries? In that time span, it was the 4th worst among running backs, and that's it. There's a reason they went and drafted Samaje Perine. He was reportedly the number 4 running back on their board. Bobby, are you still loving Rob Kelly like you have in past episodes?
Well, now I'm not. Now I'm all sad because it's true. There's no doubt about it. Rob Kelly's not going to hold on to the job, and it's a shame because I think he's really good. I'm still going to draft him just in spite of the Redskins.
I probably fall somewhere in between you guys. I mean, I think Kelly's going to open the year as a starter. I think that's now the speculation. I know originally it was sort of maybe Perine would pass him right to open the season. I think Kelly is still going to open the season. And it would really be much more about whether or not you trust him to hold on to the job the whole season or not. And I certainly don't. I mean, Tags pointed out that great stat, and that's what it is. And as the season went on, he just completely fell off. I mean, overall, he averaged something like 4.2 yards per carry, but obviously after his big game, that really fell off. So I expect Kelly to open the season as the starting running back, but I expect him to lose the job to Perine at some point kind of early on in the season.
He just missed so many. He broke so many tackles, but the thing is, like, Pirine is just a better version of him. He just is. That's what they're saying, at least. So, I'm inclined to believe him. I haven't watched him play since he's been in training camp, but they're impressed.
Yeah. Well, I think that Robert Kelly is the type of running back that looks for contact. I don't think he's elusive, and I think that's why people want to love him, because they see him, like trucking people over. But the thing is, the reason that happens is because he's not elusive and he's not fast. It's the only thing he can do, and that's just not going to work. And I think that P. Ryan is a little more elusive than he is. I think he's faster than he is, and I think he's a better receiver than he is. That's why, for me, P. Ryan, all the hype that he's getting, I think that has legs to it, just because, Carlos Hyde and Robert Kelly are two completely different running backs. So
where would you draft him then, Tags?
Who, Robert Kelly or P. Ryan?
Both.
So Robert Kelly, I'm not drafting. I will not have him on any of my teams. I'm not kidding. He's probably in my 40s, 50s. Like, I think he's going to be irrelevant by the end of the season. I think if you own him in Dynasty right now, you should be looking to get whatever you can. As for Pirine, there's obviously some risk that he's not going to start the running back, become the starter right away, and that's the concern, right? Because you don't want to spend top dollar and spend like a top 32 pick or a top 32 running back pick on him, not knowing if you may have to hold on to him on your bench for 3-4 weeks before he takes over that starting role. If we hear Gruden come out and say that Pirine's the starter and that's the end of it, I'm willing to draft him inside the top 32 running backs, right around guys like Kenneth Dixon, Amir Abdullah, Paul Perkins, in that range.
I'd take him over Paul Perkins, no doubt about it. I'm just not impressed with that guy.
Well, I don't think we've seen enough Paul Perkins to totally rule him out. Wayne Gallman was drafted there. I think it's a sigh of relief for Giants fans who are, or I should not Giants fans, but Paul Perkins owners. If you own him in like a dynasty or a keeper league, you're rejoicing right now because there was talk about LeGarrette Blount potentially going there to steal that goal line work, and so now it seems like it's actually Perkins' job. Have you heard anything more about that, Dan?
No, I was going to say the same thing. I think LeGarrette Blount was really the giant rumor that was going around. And other than that, it sounds like they're just going to let Perkins run with it. And I'm again kind of in between. I don't love what I see from Perkins when I watch him, but his numbers were, really better than I expected when I looked at them. It was 4.4 yards per carry, and he's decent as a pass catcher out of the backfield. It was his rookie year, so I'm a little more bullish on him. I'd like to see what he can do. I do think he's going to get the role, and if he can run with it, which I kind of expect him to, I think he's going to be a pretty valuable fantasy asset.
Yeah, he's extremely elusive. It's just a matter of his speed. He doesn't have that long speed to break the long runs like someone like Devonta Freeman showed, because his situation and his position this year reminds me a lot of Devonta Freeman a couple years ago. But guys, before we move into our second and third year players, this is the segment that I wanted to do with you guys. So I didn't tell them before the show what we were going to do. Obvious. It's called Name That Player. And what I'm going to do is we're going to do this when we have guests on. I'm going to go through and I'm going to have 3 players in mind, and I'm going to give out little clues to Bobby and our guest, basically to go through, and whoever gets it first gets that point. It's going to be best of 3. We're doing 3 players. So, do you guys understand the rules of this? When you hear the player, shout out his name, okay?
I'm nervous.
Or when you know the player.
Dan eats mushrooms on his pizza, so he doesn't mess around.
Well, it's not artichoke, but we'll be all right.
All right. So the first hint, I scored in 7 of 9 games in 2016, despite seeing more than 9 targets just once.
Kyle Rudolph.
Nope.
Okay, keep going. I want the next clue.
Yep. When you guys have a guess, just shout it out, and I'll tell you who gets it.
Okay,
is Dan typing stuff in? Is he like cheating?
Oh yeah, I am cheating, and I did not get it. So more hints, please.
I've scored 11 touchdowns in my last 15 games, as long as my starting quarterback was playing.
I hate this game.
11 touchdowns in my last 15 games, as long as my starting quarterback was playing. Next hint, I'm going into my 4th season, and I will be a free agent at the end of it.
This is really hard.
Yeah, this is terrible, especially since I can't type and try to figure it out.
No, there's no typing. That's the rule.
I'm not cheating. I promise.
All right. So you guys know. All right. So it's going to start getting easier. So the first one to say it, I play for the Indianapolis Colts.
Dante Moncrief.
Yep. Dan gets the first point here. Dante Moncrief did score in 7 of 9 games in 2016.
Of course, it's funny now that you say that. Obviously, it's because he basically scored every game Every single game he played, he would just
right.
constantly get a touchdown. And I would constantly be thinking, like, I don't really want to rely on Moncrief this week, but every week it would be like 40 yards and a touchdown. So, yeah.
It's true, yep.
So I'm going to pull out, because I'm sick and everything, obviously I couldn't come up with that one. But for whatever reason, whenever you said the Indianapolis Colts, the only receiver I could think about was Eric Swoop. And I was like, nah, it's not him. So I'll just let Dave get it. Why did that happen? What is going on in my brain?
Something.
That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, maybe it's the artichoke. That's what I'm going to blame it on.
Try mushrooms next time, Bobby.
All right. The question number 2, or player number 2, I finished with the 15th most receiving yards and the 14th most receiving touchdowns in the NFL last season. Yet I'm being drafted outside the top 65 receivers in 2017.
Terrell Williams.
Yes.
What? Yeah, baby. Yes.
That should count as like 4. That was great.
I was just letting you get the lead just so I could just rip your heart out, Dan.
That's fair.
There you go.
That was a great one. Yeah, that was great.
It was. All right. And now we have the tiebreaker, guys. The last and final player. 47.5% of my yards came on just 16 carries in 2016.
Isaiah Crowell.
Yep. Wow.
Boom, baby.
Wow.
Man.
Bobby came out firing. You guys were like slacking on Moncrief, and then all of a sudden Bobby's just like Tyrell Williams, Isaiah Crowell.
All right. I'm switching to artichokes. That's done. It's fair. You
Dude,
win.
you gotta go for it.
I'm doing it.
Yeah, my next clue on Crowell was going to be I am being drafted as a borderline RB1 right now, and I didn't even know that. I took a look at ADP today because I was trying to keep an idea.
Way too high.
He's being drafted as the RB13 right now.
Really?
In standard format.
That is so stupid.
Yeah, that's high for me. I think you're drafting him somewhat at his ceiling there because Duke Johnson's not going away.
Yeah, Duke Johnson. I like Duke Johnson this year, by the way. That was a great segment.
Yeah,
we can talk about that later. That was a great segment. The Moncrief part was great. The other two parts, not as good.
I'm not sure if I'll like that segment if I don't have the answers right away. But no, let's bring it back next time. That sounds good, man. That was fun.
Yeah, that was definitely
segment.
Fun. Yeah, definitely.
I tried to skip the news segment, but you guys wouldn't let me. So let's get on to what I want to talk about. That second and third year players. We'll go back to the quarterbacks. We'll just hit up Dak Prescott and Carson Wentz really quick. I don't even think Carson Wentz is draftable. I mean, I don't draft 2 quarterbacks as it is unless I'm going Philip Rivers as my number 1. But Carson Wentz, I'm just not buying it that he has much upside.
He's got some upside. I mean, he's draftable in 2 QB leagues, obviously. He's not close to being a draftable quarterback in single QB leagues, for sure. I mean, obviously, they've added Alshon, they've added Torrey Smith, and he still has the normal weapons of Zach Ertz and Jordan Matthews, everything like that. And, really, frankly...
LeGarrette Blount.
Yeah, and now LeGarrette Blount, exactly. Everybody's just going to be like, we have to stop him, let all the receivers go. But I really think that it was, he played a lot better when Lane Johnson was in, once before the Lane Johnson suspension. So I really do think if the offensive line holds up with the additional weapons, I think he's going to be good. He's not draftable in a single QB league, but in a 2 QB league, I'll definitely take him as sort of like a low end second QB with I do think he has upside.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead. I'm kind of in between here too. I don't think that he's not, I don't think he's undraftable because I think we saw a glimpse of what he can bring to the table at the start of 2016. But as you saw the year go on, it got a little less likely that he would break out in 2017 until, of course, they went out and added Alshon Jeffrey and Torrey Smith to the receiving corps. Adding LeGarrette Blount takes away some upside for me because I think I think they do go with more like goal line plunges and they stick with that whole running towards the goal line. I thought that they were trying to move away from that with the way that they drafted. They went out and drafted 2 speedy wide receivers. They went out and grabbed 2 free agent wide receivers, and it added up for Wentz. It should have made sense, but I don't like the signing of LeGarrette Blount at all. But I have him right in that mid to late QB2 area. So I think that there's upside there, sure, but he's not someone I'm going to build my team around and expect him to live up to all the expectations that people are placing on him. I think he's somewhere around that Carson Palmer range for me.
Let me ask you guys this about Dak Prescott. So let's say you're playing in a dynasty league. Is Dak Prescott your number 3 quarterback behind Andrew Luck and Aaron Rodgers?
It's close for me.
Yeah, he's
good. I'm higher on them than most. I think I have him as my QB4, to be honest. I think I have him right behind Russell Wilson. So I'm a huge fan of both Russell Wilson and Dak Prescott. I think they're similar quarterbacks, as a matter of fact. They both have the ability to run, but they're not run-first quarterbacks. They want to throw the ball. They can run it, whereas like the opposite, where it's like you have a Cam Newton who's he can run the ball, and well, he can run the ball. I don't know. That's what I'm saying. It's just like these guys are actual dual threats and can throw the ball. Their accuracy is fantastic. So yeah, Dan, what's your take on Dak Prescott?
Love him. I would have him higher than Wilson, mainly because, frankly, I am concerned for Russell Wilson's health. And I don't understand the idea that you're just going to neglect your offensive line when you have a quarterback like that. We saw what happened last year. So I'm legitimately worried with how much is going to get hit. And I love Prescott, especially long term. But I was looking it up for the final 9 fantasy games he had. So not week 17 where he basically didn't play. He averaged 23.2 fantasy points per game. That was after Des Bryant came back and everything like that. 6 quarterbacks averaged that over 23 points per game last year. Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees, Matt Ryan, Andrew Luck, Tom Brady, and Kirk Cousins. He can be a superstar in this league. He can be a superstar as soon as this year. I'm not saying that I'm going to draft him quite that high. A, you don't need to. And B, there's still obviously some risk there, but in a dynasty league, absolutely. He's my number 3. I love him. I think he's really going to take another step this year, and he's just going to keep growing.
Do you think that maybe they might let him pass a ton, and eventually he's this kind of 4,500-yard quarterback with 40 touchdowns? Can he eventually be that guy?
With Zeke, it's hard to see it, man.
Right.
With Zeke, they build their offense around Zeke. And for me, honestly, I was gaga over Des Bryant and Dak Prescott this year before I dove into the strength of schedule. Now, granted, this is something I believe is totally overrated every single year. Strength of schedule can change so much. But when you look at the pure matchups that they have this year, I mean, to start the year, they're playing the Giants and then Denver, then Arizona. And then, you further down the line, and you're going to see him play those teams again. They have Washington, who has Josh Norman. They're going to lock him up with Des Bryant, who shuts down Des Bryant. Then the Giants again. And they have the Oakland in Week 15, Seattle in Week 16. It's just their schedule just never lets up, really. And that's my concern, is that the Cowboys didn't go out and get a number 2 wide receiver to play opposite Des Bryant. And I think that's my biggest concern about Dak Prescott right now, is that Des is getting older. They have tough matchups. They play against teams with shutdown cornerbacks. And if they take away Des Bryant, I'm worried about what Dak Prescott's going to be able to do. I think it's going to be more heavily relied on Ezekiel Elliott.
Well, Des Bryant's probably going to miss the first 8 weeks anyway with the foot injury.
Don't start, sick guy. You're sick right now. You cannot talk about people being injured.
I just dominated that segment. I can talk about whatever I want.
I think that's definitely a fair point. Obviously, I rarely kind of, and neither do you, obviously. I know you're not saying that, but I don't worry that much about strength of schedule at this point. Obviously, it is a minor concern and stuff like that. And yeah, they can, but he's so mature and he's so smart, and the running game is so good and the line is so good that I think that he's going to be able to succeed even if you take away Des Bryant. Now, I agree. I would have much rather seen like a legitimate second wide receiver in there, but I don't know. I'm definitely high on him. I'm not that worried this year. I'm ready to go.
Well, Jason Witten, guys, he's still there.
That's true.
Oh, God.
He's better for another 20 years, apparently.
Yeah,
I mean, that's just
didn't he sign through like 2020 or something like that?
But like all NFL contracts, it's 5 years, meaning it's really, half a year.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Let's talk about these running backs, guys. And from the third year class, this running back class is incredible. Everyone thought it was going to be Todd Gurley's class, but I'm looking at these guys. David Johnson, Jay Ajayi, Melvin Gordon. Are you worried about any of these guys taking a step forward? Do you guys think Todd Gurley can maybe be that superstar?
I think Todd Gurley is, it's funny because I jumped on a Dynasty podcast. I can't remember which one it was right now, but basically they asked me, give me a sell or a buy low right now. And I said buy low on Todd Gurley. And they were like, well, Mike, he's like being drafted as a top 5 running back. And I said, never mind, then sell high.
He is? What?
In Dynasty, he's still viewed as like a top 5 running back. I don't view him that way, but with Sean McVay coming to LA, I do think it's going to change the culture there. I think that they can play in and scheme. I think Jeff Fisher kind of ruined the offense there for a little while. They're saying Jared Goff is exceeding expectations that they're setting for him. I do believe that
they must be
pretty. I mean, they must be low.
Well, I mean, after last year, can you blame them if they were low? But they need to rebuild the kid's confidence. I think he was thrown into the fire way too early. Todd Gurley should take a step forward. You know that they're going to build the offense around him. You know that he's going to see 300 plus carries. Like, that's just a given. That's a guarantee. They didn't really bring in a third down back that's, viable. I mean, you have Lance Dunbar, but we haven't seen him on a football field in essentially 2 years. So, Yeah, I mean, I think Gurley is an interesting bounce back candidate, even though I'm not a huge fan of his talent.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. I don't think he's ever going to get back to what we kind of thought he might be before last season. But yeah, Sean McVay obviously changes things. He's an offensive-minded coach, and he's gotten over 20 touches, average 20 touches per game each of the last 2 seasons. If he can just have an average season, if he can have 4 yards per carry, he'd have a very, very solid season. But I mean, he's got 1 game with 100 rushing yards in his past 24 games. That's insane. You know what I mean? And that goes beyond just how horrible. I mean, I like him. I think he's in the ECR. He's the 10th running back. That sounds about right to me. But I don't think I would be shocked if he, outside of health, if he finishes above Ajayi or Gordon personally.
Guys, I'm watching the Todd Gurley tape. I watched it before this show, and you know what? I think he's the second most talented running back in the NFL behind David Johnson. I think he's more talented than Ezekiel Elliott, but you watch him, and he's trying to do too much. He's trying to do everything, and he's not running like a running back anymore because the Los Angeles Rams are just such a disaster. So I think if he can go back to running like a running back, if they get any kind of passing game, I think eventually he can be a superstar. And because of that, I'd rather draft him than Jay Ajayi because Ajayi has all these injury issues. I'm not sure he's going to last more than a couple weeks.
I'm just worried about Ajayi's ceiling due to the lack of receiving that he's been seeing. I don't think he's much of a receiver. I know they talked about Kenyon Drake getting some more playing time this year. They obviously still have Damian Williams there, who's eating up some of the work. And then, and you talk about someone like Gurley, it's his backfield. Like, he's only coming off the field if they need someone if he needs a breather. That's the only time he's coming off, Whereas Ajayi, we still view him as that 1-2 down back. He's a special 1 and 2 down back, sure. But the lack of 3 down work, I have no issue with someone telling me they want to take Todd Gurley over Jay Ajayi. I really don't. Like, especially with the injury concerns built in as well.
Well, look, when you're rushing for over 200 yards a game, who cares if you can catch passes, right? That's all you really need for Ajayi.
You're right.
I mean, obviously, health is a huge concern. I mean, remember, Ajayi was he a 5th round draft pick? And that was not because of his talent. It was because of his health. He had the knee concerns and everything like that. Really, and not only, what's funny is it's not just about his health, it's the health of the line too, right? I mean, his huge games were really when the offensive line was entirely healthy. And is Mike Pouncey going to ever be able to stay healthy for a full season? You never really know about that. So I would be a little worried about that. But again, it is health related. For me, the biggest winner of a guy who I didn't expect to be high on is Gordon. He's, for me, taken a bump because Danny Woodhead obviously is a Raven. Chargers didn't draft a running back, and they drafted the 2 offensive linemen with Lamp and Feeney. They signed Russell Okung. I mean, he was fantastic last year. And he was one of these guys who, if anybody listened to me, I'm really sorry, because I basically was like, sell this guy, because it just did not.
Me too, man.
Right? Exactly. Like, it did not look. And then he just took off completely until the injury. So, frankly, I'm buying it right now. I like the situation. I like the offensive line getting beefed up. Obviously, they have 13,000 wide receivers now, so who knows if they're going to go into more of a pass-happy thing. But frankly, I really think of all the guys, Melvin Gordon is a guy who, obviously David Johnson excluded, Melvin Gordon is the guy who I think kind of has risen the most for me in the preseason.
Interesting.
Yes. I'm right there with you. Melvin Gordon is, I'm really debating and putting him as my number 4 running back in front of LaShawn McCoy. I haven't quite done that, but Melvin Gordon's definitely top 5 running back for me.
Wow. Yeah, you guys, man.
The situation's fantastic there.
Yep.
I mean, you know how I felt about Melvin Gordon just because of Keenan Allen and Hunter Henry, but I think they're going to pass a ton this year. I guess we'll see. I think he's due for some touchdown regression, but
the one thing is, by the way,
you guys are selling me a little bit.
He was involved in the passing game. That's the thing. I mean, he had 41 catches last year for 400 yards and 2 scores. Yeah, he's not a guy who's just completely left out in the cold once they start passing. He really, I agree, top 5 for sure. I'm right there with you, Mike.
Yeah, no, the one player I want to ask you guys about that I'm worried about, and it might just be the Bears thing in me, it might just be whatever, but I'm legitimately concerned about Jordan Howard. Right now I see his ECR at number 6 right behind Melvin Gordon, and I am not drafting him anywhere close to that. I'd rather take Devonta Freeman, Ajayi. I mean, I just don't, I can't see it anymore. I'm sorry. I just don't think that John Fox wants a 1 running back system. I think it was out of necessity for a majority of last year. And you saw him, we talked about it. He dropped 5 passes in a single game, which ultimately pulled him off the field on 3rd downs. And, they went out and got Benny Cunningham in free agency. They went and drafted Tarek Cohen. They still have Jeremy Langford on the roster. They still have Kadeem Carey. Are you guys concerned about Jordan Howard, or you guys can just tell me I'm nuts, that I shouldn't be worried at all?
You're not nuts. I mean, it makes sense to be a pessimistic Bears fan, but I'm telling you, Jordan Howard is really good. When you have Jordan Howard on your team, you just give him the ball. You don't do the 2 running back thing. He was awesome, and they were keying on him too. I think this year they're going to open it up, pass a little bit more, and I think that's going to help Jordan Howard out. I'm still drafting him with confidence.
Yeah, I agree. I'm confused by the fact that there are that many running backs. I don't really understand why you need Langford and Carey and Cunningham and Cohen and everything like that. So that makes me a little strange. But yeah, man, I'll be honest. I'm with Bobby on this one. I feel very good. Again, you're a Bears fan, so you might sort of have more of an insight into it. But I mean, he was great last year. He was second in rushing yards behind Zeke, I think. And he gained the most yardage between the tackles, according to Pro Football Focus, which is something that I really kind of made my eyes kind of pop out a little bit. And I like the line. I know, Mike, I read your article on it, which was great. And I know the offensive line. I feel like the offensive line is pretty solid, with Kyle Long and Whitehair and everything like that. I like it. I'm inclined to agree with Bobby on this one. I'm pretty bullish on him.
I hope you guys are right. I really do. I have my concerns about him, and I stated those. So, I mean, that's the thing. It's something I need to maybe reevaluate. But would you guys legitimately take him over Devonta Freeman?
Yes. I mean, it's pretty close, but yeah, I would.
Yeah, it's close. I think I'd probably have Freeman. It would be a 1A and 1B sort of scenario for me. I wouldn't really worry about it. If I had both of them sitting there, I'd be like, well, whatever, flip a coin. So I'd probably take Freeman first. But yeah, that's where I have him. Certainly right up there.
Gotcha. Yeah, my concern is obviously and not just the fact that all those running backs are there, but John Fox traditionally has had 2-back systems. He just doesn't lean on one running back. He's not like Andy Reid where he wants one running back to do everything. And I mean, granted, next year John Fox, I don't think he's the coach of the Chicago Bears, so things can change rather quickly.
Right. Yeah.
So guys, from this awesome draft class with David Johnson, Todd Gurley, Jay Ajayi, Melvin Gordon, you've got 3 other guys that I think have a lot of talent, but their problem is they're not going to get enough carries. At least I don't think so. But let's say that Devonta Freeman does go down. Let's say they do give the ball to Amir Abdullah a ton, or Eddie Lacy goes down. So you've got Tevin Coleman, Amir Abdullah, and Thomas Rawls. If any of them were the bell cow starting running backs, would they be superstars?
I think Tevin Coleman definitely would be. I think that he already provides fantastic value just being sort of the change of pace back, So I think if Devonta Freeman went down and he all of a sudden is getting all of the carries, he'd be pretty fantastic. So he would definitely be a guy that I'd be looking for. I would not be excited about Rawls personally. First of all, we've talked about the line, a million times. He can't stay healthy. I have no interest in Rawls. And who's the other one?
Rawls is Rob Kelly with a bad offensive line.
Right. He's and more injury prone, frankly. So I mean, he just gets the downgrade on all that. And who's the third one that you mentioned?
Amir Abdullah. Amir
Abdullah, who I've already talked about. I'm completely obsessed with.
What about this? Duke Johnson. I pretend this. Let's pretend Devonta Freeman's out of the picture. Let's pretend Isaiah Crowell's out of the picture. Who do you take between Tevin Coleman and Duke Johnson?
I am taking Tevin Coleman. I hesitated. I mean, I'd take Coleman, and I wouldn't hesitate to do that in an actual draft, but I hesitated in saying it because I felt like, oh God, I don't want it to sound like I don't like Duke Johnson, because I really like Duke Johnson this year, you know what I mean? Not only because I think he is a great handcuff if you go that way, he's good in a pinch for bye weeks. I mean, he has been, on the worst side of the platoon for sure in this running back split, and he's still got 1,800 total yards in his first 2 seasons without really doing anything. You know what I mean? He's great, obviously, as a pass catcher. So I would be really, really, really excited for him if Crowell went down. But no, if it'd be Coleman for me.
Now, the one other guy I want to talk about from this draft class, he's not on a team. I don't know, maybe he was signed by someone and I just didn't see it. Carlos Williams, I think, is extraordinarily talented. He just, he can't get on the field. If he does get on the field, how good can he be?
I think we saw how good he could be. He was like legitimately dominant when he played with the Bills for that 1 year, but I think he might be out of football. It's now been a long time. He's just out of football. He was with the Steelers. I don't know if he's still on their roster at this point or if they let him go. But man, the fact that they drafted James Conner, even if he was on their roster, I think that's the end of the dream. So yeah, unfortunately, I think Carlos Williams, his football days are over, which is sad because there were some really, really nice traits to his game.
I'd sign him. If I was an NFL GM, I'd sign Carlos Williams right now.
I'd rather have him over than LeGarrette Blount.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
I don't think he's on the Steelers anymore, by the way. I think he is just out there and nobody wants to sign him. So, I agree.
I'll tell you what, man. You give me a team with Tim Tebow and Carlos Williams.
Oh, stop it. The artichoke's getting to your head again.
A baseball team or a football team? Which one are you talking about?
Yeah.
Does Carlos Williams play baseball?
Yeah, maybe. We'll probably find out soon enough.
So going on to the wide receivers, we're going to skip over Amari Cooper because we all know he's the GOAT. We don't need to talk about him very much.
Correct.
But let's talk about Corey Coleman. And what do you guys expect from him this year? I know some people are expecting Kenny Britt to do some big things, but I'm not a Britt guy. I mean, last year was the first year that he eclipsed 800 yards in his career, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm not really jumping all over Kenny Britt and thinking he's like, all of a sudden he broke out when he's 29 years old. Like, I just don't see that. I think he's a fine receiver, but I think Corey Coleman is supposed to be a difference maker. And I think that, are we in the conversation now where you feel comfortable starting Corey Coleman when you go into your fantasy season?
No, I wouldn't start Kenny Britt either. I mean, I do like Kenny Britt. I watched the film, and I've been impressed with this guy since he entered the NFL. But think about who his quarterbacks have been. Vince Young, Sean Manning didn't start. Never mind. I'm thinking of all these. Sean Hill was the guy for the St. Louis Rams. And then
Matt Hasselbeck.
Those have been his quarterbacks.
Matt Hasselbeck was the bomb, man.
I think Kenny Britt's pretty good, but no, I'm not starting Corey Coleman. I don't mind drafting him, but he's a wide receiver 4 in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, he's close. I could see him being a low end wide receiver 3 when it gets there. I mean, we just don't really know what we're going to be able to get from him. Obviously, the quarterback play drags him down, no matter what it is. Last year you kind of have to throw it out, right? He looked great to start, and then he broke his hand, and then he was pretty horrible when he came back, which I think you can probably blame on the hand. He was dropping tons of passes and everything like that. So I think you can probably just assume that he never really got back to full health. So I do like him. I'm bullish on him for the long term in dynasty leagues. But for now, I don't know. I'm not that. And it's not that Kenny Britt. I mean, whatever. Kenny Britt is fine, but I just really, it's more about the quarterback play and who's going to be throwing.
They got Brock Osweiler now, though, man.
That's true.
Oh God,
that's true. Well, it's gonna be Kessler to open the season, right? Are we? Is that?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
We're all in agreement on that, right? Okay. Not that makes me feel better.
Kessler's not a bad quarterback, guys. Like, he's not awful. I think he's Alex Smithian. Like, I think that he can support. I think he could support one. I think he could support one fantasy relevant receiver and make another one, on the border.
Yeah, I think so as well. I'm curious what you guys think about Kevin White. I mean, you guys all know I have shirts made up of like, I heart Kevin White. So I'm not even going to talk about him. He was drafted 7th overall, hasn't been on the field because of injury issues, but he can be really, really good, right?
I think so. I mean, it's hard to say, and that's why people writing off Kevin White, I think it's a little bit of a mistake because we really don't know. We really haven't seen him on the field. I mean, what's he seen? 30 career targets? Like, we can't write him off at this point. And honestly, I think he's in line to see at least 100 targets as long as he stays in the field. And if you see 100 targets, you're automatically locked into the top 50 wide receiver conversation. And I want to say his ADP is somewhere in the upper 40s, in between 45 and 50, somewhere around there. So I think the upside that you could have with Kevin White is well worth his price right now.
Yeah, I don't see him as someone who I'm going to be drafting in most leagues, just because probably I'll play in all my leagues with Bobby and he'll be gone by, the 4th round or something like that. But yeah, I mean, but you mentioned the targets. I agree. I think, he's barely played in his career, but he averages about 9 targets per game. That's great. You know what I mean? And with them letting Alshon Jeffrey walk, I think that they're ready to kind of make him a focal point if he can stay healthy. That is always sort of the deal with him. And that's another, there's another, obviously, second, I think it's his second year, is Cameron Meredith. Or is he a 3rd year? Whatever it is. But, I don't really know. I think, Mike, I've read some of your stuff. You're not that high on Cameron Meredith, especially in the long term. But the bottom line, though, is there are a lot of mouths to feed there, right? I mean, between Cameron Meredith and Kevin White, and then they also they signed Marcus Wheaton and Kendall Wright, and the corpse of Eddie Royal is still hanging around. So I mean, they
finally cut him. They finally cut Eddie Royal. They did
all
finally.
Right. Oh, my bad. All right. Well, good for them. That they're now they're like every fantasy owner in the world.
Yes.
So I think that it's a little tough because they do have so many mouths to feed, and Mike Glennon, I assume, is going to be the starter for most of the season. So I don't really know. But I feel like White is a guy who I'm going to be intrigued by, and I'm just never going to be able to pull the trigger on in a draft.
Good. I'll take him.
All right, you got it.
Two guys I love from this class, Brashard Perryman and Devin Funchess. I'm kind of worried now about Funchess now that they drafted those two receiving running backs, but it seems to me like he's going to get a lot of targets and no one's talking about him.
Yeah, I'm with you. I still believe you're talking about Funchess, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Funchess, I didn't know if you went over to Perriman. They're kind of in the same category, right? I just believe in Devin Funchess' talent more than I do than Perriman. Now, granted, Funchess now, it's like, where do the targets come from, right? Like you have to worry about the fact that they're coming from Cam Newton, one, and then two, that they've now, not only do they have Kelvin Benjamin on the roster, who is taking up a lot of space, both like literally and figuratively. Then you have Christian McCaffrey, you have Curtis Samuel, you have Greg Olsen. Like, there's a lot of targets there. But then you look at Brashad Perriman, all he's competing with is Mike Wallace. That's it. And Danny Woodhead. I mean, I guess Danny Woodhead, we can't forget about him. But not just that, but the Ravens threw the ball, I think that they threw the ball the second most in the NFL last year. So,
isn't that crazy?
Yeah, these targets have to go somewhere. So for me, I mean, Brashad Perriman's, I guess, the one that you'd want to own between the two, but I do think that Funchess has some upside to him.
Yeah, I'm going to get Perriman a lot of drafts.
Me too. I'm a big, I'm not a big Perriman guy, whatever that means. You know what I mean? I'll draft him as a bench guy or something like that. But I'm inclined to agree. I imagine that the Ravens are going to, I know there's rumors that they'll sign Anquan Bolden, unless I've missed something that he's signed somewhere. So my guess is that he'll probably come on board as well. But the thing about Perriman is his last 9 games, he scored 47 fantasy points and he had 33 targets. That's 1.4 fantasy points per target. That's a lot. If he winds up getting a ton of targets, like, obviously it's a kind of expected because the targets have to go somewhere. As Tags pointed out, the Ravens throw a lot. He should score. I mean, if he, wouldn't expect that number, 1.4 fantasy points per target every time, but he will score a pretty decent amount. So he's definitely a guy. I really haven't thought that much about Funchess this since the draft, quite frankly. So Perriman is definitely a guy who I'm going to be targeting as a bench guy with upside in most of my leagues.
So basically, we all agree Kevin White and Brashard Perriman over Amari Cooper, right?
Oh God. Anyways, so no, Bobby, real quick, who would you take, Kevin White or Brashad Perriman in a redraft right now?
Both. White's first though.
Yeah, I'm with you.
I'm going Perriman.
You're going Perriman. It's really close. I'm taking both of them in the top 120.
Fair enough. That's top 10 rounds. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. All right, guys, before we end this, because we're kind of running out of time, I'm looking at this rookie class from last year. You've got Michael Thomas, who everyone knows is awesome. He's being overdrafted, I think. But I'm looking at the next guys. You've got Will Fuller, Treadwell, Josh Doxson, Shepard, Malcolm Mitchell, Tyreek Hill. I'm not drafting any of these guys. I think they're all overrated at this point. Are you guys excited about any of them?
Michael Thomas is a stud. Like, that dude, like, legitimately, I put him, right now he's my number 6 receiver right behind AJ Green. I would take Michael Thomas over my boy Amari Cooper. And that's saying a lot, but Michael Thomas with Drew Brees, he's worth a lot. I'm not talking about Dynasty. I'd take Cooper over him in Dynasty, but in a redraft, I'll take Michael Thomas 100%. Josh Doxson's intriguing to me. He's kind of like in that Kevin White conversation where it's like, I do believe that he's slated to get 100 targets. I do believe that he has some massive upside. It just depends on who you're drafting with. As for Will Fuller, I'm not even close to interested. Treadwell, not interested. Yeah, it's turned into a really sad wide receiver class, unfortunately. But Dan, where are you at on Josh Doxson? He's one that's like very, very like hit or miss. It's like you like him or you don't.
Yeah, I mean, if I have to be put into one of those two buckets, then I don't. I mean, he definitely has a ton of talent. His last season with TCU was awesome, and he's shown very brief glimpses in his very, very limited time that he played. Obviously, he missed so much time with the Achilles injury, but he's not somebody who really then I kind of am thinking about going after. Of the guys you mentioned, the guy probably, obviously Michael Thomas is the clear winner, and now that he is the top wide receiver, I think Mike Clay of ESPN, who he wrote an article about the Saints' top wide receiver in the 11 years that Peyton and Breeze have been there, and that the target share for the top wide receiver is always 20% every single year. So he's going to get a ridiculous amount of targets. The other guy who Tags had mentioned, who probably would be my next on this list, slightly above Corey Coleman, would be Tyreek Hill, who, again, I'm not, it's weird. He's kind of gimmicky, right? I mean, he was the number 20 wide receiver last year in standard leagues, but he scored 3 special teams TDs. You know what I mean? He had 260 yards rushing. I don't think that these giant, huge, massive plays are sustainable, but, Andy Reid does want to get him involved, especially if you're in a league with return yards. he jumps up there. So of all the guys you mentioned, I would think Michael Thomas would be first, and then probably Tyreek Hill would be second. Of the rest of the guys, Josh Doctson, definitely not Will Fuller. Sterling Shepard, I don't really care about that much since Brandon Marshall got on. So
everyone's talking about Tyreek Hill, but there was that guy, I can't even remember his name because nobody's talking about him, but the guy for the Falcons who had so many long receiving touchdowns, and he's not even being drafted.
Taylor Gabriel.
You guys know who I'm talking about?
Taylor Gabriel.
Yeah, what is the difference between Tyreek Hill and Taylor Gabriel?
Tyreek Hill's going to see more targets. He's involved in the running game. Like, they're actually giving him handoffs. He does have the Devin Hester effect on special teams. So I understand, like, it's weird how nobody's talking about Taylor Gabriel. And I'm guessing it has to do with the fact that Shanahan leaving. I think people are expecting that offense to naturally regress because Matty Ice, as much as I like me some Matty Ice, he's going to regress in 2017. Like, mark my words on that. His touchdown percentage is not going to be like 7.1 or whatever it was in 2016.
Yeah, and my guess is, frankly, that people are expecting Tyreek Hill to be much more involved sort of this year, whereas Gabriel was he was more of a filling in, when Jones was missing games or Sanu was missing games and stuff like that, he would come in. I think Tyreek Hill was
crazy efficient too.
Right, exactly. I think Tyreek Hill's going to be a focal point. I just
don't think it warrants a 100 spot difference in ADP. Just seems crazy to me. People are taking Hill way too high, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm not taking Tyreek Hill as a wide receiver 2. I mean, you could talk me into it a wide receiver 3. I could see that, but I think Jeremy Maclin's back. I think Travis Kelce takes some targets. I think the running game gets a little bit back on track. They have a really good defense. So Tyreek Hill is an upside play for sure, but I am counting on touchdown regression there.
All right, guys. Well, that's all we have for this week. Really appreciate you coming on, Dan.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So next week, I'm going to be out. I'm going to be out at Hilton Head. So Tags and a guest are going to be chatting about wide receiver rankings. Make sure to tune in for that episode. Subscribe on iTunes so you don't miss it. For Mike Tagliere, I'm Bobby Sylvester. Thanks for listening and enjoy your football.
I just wanted you to watch me dissolve.